Someone once said that love looks forward, hate looks back, and anxiety has eyes all over its head. And I think you can see that I spend a lot of time in that third state, anxiety. I'm the sort of person who wonders what will happen if I forget to floss my teeth tonight. I woke up in my hotel room this morning and checked myself for bedbug bites. There weren't any. I go through life with dozens of little worries each day. And maybe that's why I'm fascinated by people who voluntarily take on gigantic risks when they don't have to, when they could make their lives simpler. People like the man who stood in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square, China, 1989. What was that frail little man with his shopping bag and his jacket doing, blocking a column of tanks of a brutal army? I began to collect the names of such individuals already as a college student. I would write them on the wall of my dorm room. And today, as a social anthropologist, I ponder the power and beauty of such lives, for they have changed my sense of what it is to be human. I want to tell you then about a few of my heroes. How many of you know Malala Yousafzai? I don't mean personally, but know of her. Yeah, number of you. It was the winter of 2009 in the Swat Valley in Pakistan. The Taliban were bombing girls' schools, throwing acid in the faces of girls trying to get to school. In London, the BBC thought that it would be interesting to have a blog written by a schoolgirl in the Swat Valley. And they put the word out, and only 11-year-old Malala was willing to write such a blog. And she began by describing the concerns of an 11-year-old, such as how the Taliban had shut down the cable network so that she could no longer watch her favorite drama, My Dream Boy Will Come to Marry Me. And she wrote also of danger. I quote, "On my way home from school, I heard a man saying, 'I will kill you.' I hastened my pace. To my utter relief, he was talking on his mobile and must have been threatening someone else." And gradually the situation in Swat became calmer. Malala felt that she could speak out and use her real name in public events. Her uncle warned her that it was still dangerous. And she said to him, "My uncle is a good and kind man who cares for my well-being, but I fear that my uncle has forgotten the code of bravery." It was on the 9th of October a year ago when Malala was on the school bus after taking an exam. Two armed militants stopped the bus. One of them got on, yelled, "Which one of you is Malala? Speak up or I'll shoot you all." Malala grabbed the hand of the girl sitting next to her and closed her eyes as this militant shot her in the head and neck. A week later, in a coma, she was flown to a hospital in Birmingham, and she survived and is okay. And it was striking after Malala was shot, the global outpouring of love and support for her, people holding prayer vigils, raising money for her medical care. She was on the cover of Newsweek, Malala, the bravest girl in the world, twice on the cover of Time. Almost 1 million people nominated her for the Nobel Peace Prize on the web, as did every political party of Canada. And we can think about these reactions we have to people who have been willing to risk their lives for a common good. In 1902, the psychologist William James wrote that when we meet such a person, we feel that she is our born superior, so great is our respect for her. And James went on to say that we feel that people who are willing to risk their lives for strangers have in some way touched the mystery of existence. They have the answer to the riddle of the Sphinx. James doesn't say quite what that mystery is, but I think it's close to something that the farm workers' leader César Chavez once described at the start of a fast. I paraphrase, "To be human is to suffer for others. God help us to be human." Another who has awakened such reactions is Sophie Scholl. Some of you probably know her story well. Sophie, born in the same town as Albert Einstein in Ulm, Germany. She started university in Munich in 1942. Her brother was already there. They had a wonderful student life, dinners, discussions. But gradually they learned more and more about what their country, Hitler's Germany, was doing. They learned about the Holocaust. And Sophie and her brother decided that they had to do something. They began to write pamphlets against Hitler and to copy them secretly at night and distribute them in great secrecy around Munich and to other parts of Germany. The pamphlets created a great sensation. No one else was doing this. And then February 1943, Sophie and her brother were putting out copies of the 6th leaflet at the university in Munich. They thought that no one would see them, but a guard saw them, ran after them, grabbed them, took them to the Gestapo, and the 2 students, Sophie and Hans, were beheaded. A few years ago, a polling organization in Germany asked Germans between the ages of 18 and 40, who was the greatest German of all time? And the results came in. The greatest German of all time was Sophie Scholl and her brother Hans Scholl, ahead of Bach, Beethoven, and Einstein. I used to teach a course about civic courage and engagement at Harvard. The course attracted more than 600 students. Friends say that my ego has never recovered from that time. And Boston Magazine wrote that the course leads its students toward St. Francis-style sainthood. The course, the magazine continued, is, quote, taught by the slim, wispy-voiced, and vaguely monkish Brian Palmer. And I thought to myself, how did they find out so much about me? In the course, we interviewed various guests who had taken risks for others. And I often found that students wanted to follow with our guests in their work. At those moments, it struck me that courage can be almost as contagious as fear. But some of the examples we studied in the courses perhaps should have carried a warning label, "Don't try this at home." I think of Witold Pilecki, a Polish man raising a family in the 1930s. He was trained in music and art. He inherited his family's farm, a lovely life in the countryside. And then something happened. The Germans invaded Poland, September 1939, the start of World War II. and Witold joined the underground, the resistance. After 10 months, there were rumors circulating about a prison camp that the Germans had set up in a Polish town called Auschwitz. And the rumors were that this was a place of exceptional brutality, but no one knew the details. And Witold realized that it was important for the Polish underground and for all the forces fighting against Hitler's Germany to know exactly what was going on in Auschwitz. So he volunteered to go in. And the plan was to smuggle out messages through the network of the Polish underground. He walked into a roundup in Warsaw where the Germans were taking Jews and political prisoners, and he too was taken to Auschwitz. After a few days, he could smuggle out a first message. He wrote that a guard had become angry with him, had hit him in the face with a metal rod, and he spat out his front teeth on the ground. His messages over the next 947 days, as he described what was happening in Auschwitz, were hardly any prettier. And then Witold managed to escape one night. Running out into the darkness, he took a bullet, but he survived. Witold survived the war. He couldn't accept that the Soviet Union took over control of Poland and installed a puppet government. So he joined the resistance once more against the Soviets, was caught, tortured, and executed, 47 years old. Witold, I have trouble understanding you, how you could leave your children and wife and go into Auschwitz voluntarily. The Canadian Buddhist nun Pema Chodron writes, "Go to the places that scare you. Go to the places that scare you." And civic courage is often about going against the flow. The firefighters going up the World Trade Center on the 11th of September, when everyone who can go down and out is trying to do so. In the courses, we take up also examples from everyday life, such as Wesley Autrey, an African-American construction worker who was with his 2 young daughters on the subway platform in New York City. They saw further down on the platform a man who collapsed, who tumbled onto the track, having a seizure, just as a train was coming in on that track. Wesley ran down, he jumped down onto the track. He tried to lift up the epileptic man. He didn't have time. He pushed that man between the 2 metal rails. 4 wagons of the train roared over them, but they survived. It took half an hour before the rescue workers could retrieve these 2 men from under the subway train. Wesley said it was one of the most absurd conversations of his life because the other man didn't remember what had happened and didn't understand why he was under a New York City subway car being hugged by a stranger. But Wesley reassured him that things had really worked out for the best. It's people like Wesley and Witold, Malala, Sophie, who draw me back from the abyss of despair. These are the individuals who, in a world of violence and indifference, who remind me that it is still possible for our human species to shine this magnificently. These individuals have somehow left the anxiety-driven world and moved into a space of what to call it, a space of some kind of faith. Yes, Malala. Yes, Sophie. Yes, Witold. Yes, Wesley. I believe in your secret conspiracy of hope.